My daughter-in-law lifted my house key in front of 40 guests and said, "You can keep the teapot. We're taking the inn." My son slid a transfer folder across the tasting table and told me to sign before dessert. I looked at the papers and said nothing. Before we begin, I want to take a moment to say this. Hidden Revenge Stories is a channel about independent people who rise above pain, betrayals and hardship and take back control of their own lives. These stories are inspired by real experiences, but they are fully reimagined, so you will only hear them here. If this story speaks to you, leave your thoughts in the comments. And if you have a story of your own, feel free to share it. It may become a new story here, and your story might be the one that gives someone else the strength to keep going. Now, let me show you how this one began. My name is Nadine Wren. I was 58 when my son decided I had become decorative. Not useless exactly, just convenient. Convenient enough to wake at 5, bake for 12 rooms, fold sheets, balance invoices, and collect his little boy from nursery, but somehow not important enough to be called an owner. The inn was called Rowan Court. It sat outside Harrogate, Old Stone, ivy on the walls, a crooked orchard behind the coach house. 6 years earlier, after my husband died, I used my redundancy money and his life insurance to buy it before it went to auction. I signed every early loan document myself because my son Callum's credit was a mess back then. In the beginning, he was grateful. So was his wife, Sienna. She cried the day we opened. She said we were building something for the whole family. I believed her. For a while, it even looked true. Weekday walkers filled the rooms, Sunday lunches paid the heating bill, weddings brought the glamour. Then the language changed. I stopped being Nadine and became, "Mum, can you just cover breakfast? Can you just stay late with the linen delivery? Can you just watch Oliver while we meet photographers? Can you just use your pension this once because cash is tight and family helps family?" They put my recipes on printed menus without my name. They took my office and turned it into a bridal makeup room. They cut me out of the website entirely. When guests asked if I owned the place, Sienna would smile and say, "Oh no, she just keeps us steady." Just, that word can do a lot of damage when used often enough. The first time she called me the help, she said it laughing. She said it during a vendor tasting in front of a florist and 2 cake designers. Callum laughed too. He told them I was old school and happiest with a tea towel in my hand. I smiled, poured more coffee, and memorised every face at that table. Silence is useful when people think it means surrender. By the spring of the following year, Rowan Court looked successful from the road. Inside, it was a different story. The ballroom roof had begun to shift after a wet winter. The retaining wall near the garden steps needed urgent work. The glass marquee Sienna insisted on leasing for luxury wedding content was costing more every month than our weekday rooms brought in. I knew because I still did the books, not the glamorous parts, the real parts, payroll, supplier terms, energy contracts, VAT reminders, deposits, refund exposure. The numbers were getting tighter, and Callum kept talking about expansion as if confidence alone could hold up a roof beam. When I suggested slowing down, Sienna looked me over and said, "This is why hospitality passes older women by. You think survival is strategy." That same week, they asked me to move out of the downstairs suite I had renovated with my husband. They wanted it rebranded as the Founder's Room for premium wedding packages. They wanted my room, inside the building I had bought. I moved into the coach house without arguing. That was when they became careless. People always reveal more once they think they've won. From the coach house kitchen, I listened to their meetings through the courtyard windows. They wanted the entire business transferred into their names before summer. Younger faces, cleaner branding, investor-friendly optics. The phrase that stayed with me was Sienna's. No one wants to book a modern venue and then see his mother carrying stock through reception. His mother, not her partner, not the lender who saved the place, not the woman who had kept wages paid through 2 bad winters, just an image problem in sensible shoes. So I started preparing, quietly. I called Priya Banerjee, the accountant who had handled Rowan Court from the start. Then I called Martin Vale, the property solicitor who knew exactly which parts of the business sat where. Rowan Court, it turned out, looked simple only to people who had never read a schedule properly. The main inn, Ballroom bookings, marquee lease, supplier balances and event liabilities sat under one trading structure. The coach house kitchens, the breakfast hamper contracts, the weekday corporate lunches, and the private parking agreements sat under another. The second one was dull on paper. It was also the only part consistently making money. Priya showed me the numbers twice. If the summer weddings stayed on track, the event side might limp forward. But if the roof repair notice was enforced before August, every fixed-price booking could turn into a refund claim. Add the wall works, the marquee exit fee, and the overdue maintenance reserve. And the glamorous side of Rowan Court became a very expensive costume. Martin asked what I wanted to do. I told him the truth. I wanted to stop being used. I wanted the part of the business that actually fed people, paid properly, and slept at night. If Callum and Sienna wanted chandeliers, brochures, and public credit badly enough, they could have all of it. I decided to give them exactly what they wanted. 3 weeks later, Sienna arranged the tasting lunch that opened this story. She invited photographers, 2 minor local influencers, her sister, Callum's golfing friend, and a couple who might invest in a new era renovation. In front of all of them, she placed the folder beside my plate and said, "We're streamlining. You can keep the teapot. We're taking the inn." Callum told me it was best for everyone. He said banks preferred a sharper story, and guests trusted younger operators. He said I would still have my place, of course, the coach house, the garden, Oliver on Wednesdays, breakfast, if I insisted on keeping busy. Then he tapped the signature line and said, "Just sign it before dessert, Mum." I looked at the room. Not one person asked how much money I had put in, not one asked whose name had been on the early loans. The investor couple stared at the folder. The photographer avoided my eyes. I closed it, thanked Sienna for the meal, and told Callum I would sign on Monday, in front of the solicitor, the accountant, and anyone else he wanted in the room. He took that for defeat. Sienna took it for obedience. On Monday morning, they arrived 10 minutes early at Martin Vale's office, dressed for triumph. Sienna wore cream. Callum wore the watch I had bought him when the inn survived its first profitable Christmas. They had even invited the investor couple, as if control were already theirs. Martin began carefully. Priya sat beside him with 3 folders and a repair report. Helen Forbes from the bank joined by video. Martin explained that the transfer package included the ballroom operation, the inn's event bookings, the marquee lease, supplier obligations, staffing liabilities, and all repair covenants attached to continued trading. He asked twice whether they wanted independent advice. Sienna said yes, they understood. Callum said they were ready. Then Priya opened the schedules. Roof stabilisation, retaining wall reconstruction, marquee termination, revised insurance terms, refund exposure on 18 summer weddings if works began before completion, VAT catch-up, cash reserve requirement. The room changed temperature 1 page at a time. Callum interrupted twice. Priya did not. She simply kept reading. Helen from the bank confirmed that any transfer completed that day would also require fresh personal guarantees if they wanted continued financing. The investor couple stopped smiling. Sienna finally asked the question she should have asked 3 weeks earlier. "What exactly are we getting?" Martin answered before I could. "The liabilities attached to the image you preferred." Then he slid the land plans across the table. The profitable coach house kitchens were not in the transfer. Neither were the breakfast hamper contracts. Neither was the weekday corporate catering account, the orchard supper licence, or the parking agreement with the medical clinic up the road. Those now sat lawfully and neatly, inside Wren Table Limited, under my control. Sienna stared at me as if I had changed species. "You split the business." I folded my hands and looked back at her. "No, I kept the part I built. You asked for the ballroom, the bookings, the brand boards, the glossy photographs, and every shiny headache attached to them. I didn't stop you." Callum went pale when he realised the room he wanted most was not the business at all. It was the burden. He asked why I had not warned him. Priya answered that one for me. She reminded him she had emailed the summaries twice. Martin reminded him he had declined separate review because he wanted completion before the wedding showcase. Sienna said the deal was absurd now. Martin nodded and said they were free not to sign. but greed is stubborn once it has announced itself publicly. They had already bragged about a takeover. They had already promised a rebrand. They had already treated me like an old woman being moved politely out of frame. Walking away would have cost them face. So they signed, not because I forced them, because they could not bear to look small in front of witnesses. Callum signed first. Sienna after him, jaw tight, pen cutting into the page. When it was over, the investor couple withdrew within the hour. The bank required reserves they did not have. For the first time in years, none of that belonged to me. Callum looked at me across the polished table and asked very quietly what I planned to do now. I stood, picked up my copy and gave him the only answer he had earned. I kept the part that feeds people. You kept the part that needed rescuing. Then I walked out before either of them could borrow my calm. That summer, Rowan Court weddings closed for repairs 6 weeks earlier than Sienna had promised everyone. There were angry phone calls, refund negotiations, supplier pressure, endless contractor meetings. I heard about them, of course. Harrogate is not large, and humiliation travels quickly when it wears a tailored jacket. Meanwhile, I reopened the coach house under a new name. Wren Table. No chandeliers, no staged influencer corners. Just 12 quiet rooms, orchard breakfasts, a supper club on Fridays, and corporate lunch hampers that went out before noon and got paid on time. Omar, our old breakfast chef, came with me. So did Elsie from housekeeping. Stability has its own magnetism. Oliver still came on Wednesdays. That was the line I refused to punish him for crossing. Children should not have to pay for the vanity of adults. Sometimes he helped me wash strawberries in the coach house kitchen. Sometimes he slept on the window seat while I checked invoices. In those hours my life felt smaller than before, and far more mine. 9 months later, I saw Callum alone for tea. Not at the inn. At my place. He looked older, not from years but from consequences. He told me he finally understood the difference between being visible and being responsible. He said glamour had hidden the real work from him. I let him say it without helping. He asked whether I hated him. I told him no. Hate is exhausting, and I had ovens to check. He asked if things could ever be repaired between us. I told him that depended on whether he wanted a mother, or another unpaid emergency service. For once, he did not rush to answer. I live in the coach house now. The orchard blooms in the spring. The invoices are dull. The guests are kind. My name is on the door, the menus, and the accounts that matter. Every now and then, someone asks whether I miss the grand ballroom and the wedding crowds. I smile and pour the tea myself. No, I don't miss performing ownership for people who never respected it. I prefer this. Work that is honest, rooms that are full, silence that belongs to me. And whenever I pass the old stone path between the two buildings, I remember the day my daughter-in-law lifted my key and thought she was taking my life. She wasn't. She was only taking the part that looked expensive from across the room. The valuable part had always been quieter than that. So was I. That was why they missed it. And that was why I won.
Thank you for watching. If you'd like to hear more, you can follow this channel. Don't forget to hit that little bell icon to be notified when a new video is uploaded.